Hello everybody, I'm just testing out the camera. Welcome to the Hermitage. Croeso i'r Lloches, and Lama Shenpen will be with us in about 10 minutes. Everybody okay with those things? Chair. I'm going to get my chair in the kitchen. Hello, everybody. Just testing.
That's not what I expected.
Please stand for the Lama Shenpen.
Benefit for beings, and especially for like a Hermitage, who something that died, as a tragic thing. It was in the first year, wasn't it? October was estimate, so it's really much.
Might just need to adjust that.
So here we have an example of adapting the Buddhist customs to the customs of the country we live in. I think in the East it would be a horrific thing for a woman sitting here teaching with the head on the floor, but I think Chinmay is demonstrating the Bodhisattva conduct, the Mahayana Bodhisattva conduct of doing what he feels is most beneficial in the circumstances, and I am too. Okay.
Just got now, so this camera here is the one that's live.
Hello everybody. Is anyone there?
And it's also got the microphone in it that they're hearing.
Okay.
So it's just worth. There's
What's the significance
lots
of
of
that?
people there.
Oh, is there? Right. Okay, so shall we begin? We have a prayer that to Milarepa, which I like to pray to Milarepa before I start teaching. So it's on page
A21, I think.
Milarepa is one of the great teachers of our lineage. great enlightened teachers of our lineage. Guru. You see that everything in samsara nirvana is merely dependently arisen. You see the Dharmata of true being, that is the essence of all dependent arising. The power of your great insight fills the universe with auspicious light. Almighty Shepherd Dorje, please rise up now from within my heart. You see that everything in samsara nirvana is merely dependently arisen. You see the Dharmata of true being, that is the essence of all dependent arising. The power of your great insight fills the universe with auspicious light. Almighty Shepherd Dorje, please rise up now from within my heart. Jimila Shepherd Dorje la so. 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 Lord Mila laughing Vajra, I call to you. 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 So, the topic for today's talk is again the precepts. Precepts in, what do we call it?
Precepts and what?
In our life, is it?
Something like that.
Something like that, okay. So we've got a mixed audience here because we have people who I've not met at all, so I don't know where you are, and some people are just visiting, and we have again here. So we've got people here who are not in the room. So the reason I'm talking about precepts is because we're doing an online course on the precepts, and I told the students who were doing that course that if they gave me questions, I would answer them. So since the questions are of general interest at whatever level one's practice, I thought I would combine this talk this afternoon with the talk about answering their questions. I was thinking about the precepts and thinking about first of all, I need to say what precepts are. In Buddhism, there's lists of, or sets of, should I say, there's sets of directives about what is positive actions and what are negative actions, and the positive ones are the ones to be adopted and the negative ones are the ones to be avoided. They're to be adopted because they lead to happiness for oneself and others, and they're to be avoided because they bring suffering for oneself and others. So I think that's pretty sound from anyone's point of view. So then the different sets are used in different circumstances. Often in certain historical periods one set was more popular than another, but the most well-known ones are the 5 precepts, and they're the basic: not killing, not stealing, not lying, not committing sexual misconduct, and not taking intoxicants, just putting them short. But then there's a lot of discussion then about how one interprets and understands those precepts under different circumstances. So that's why there's a lot of discussion going on about that, and has done over the millennia. And sometimes they're balanced by the 5 positive actions, which are to save life, to give generously, to be honest and truthful, to use one's sexuality in a way that's beneficial for others, and to lead a sober life, sort of keeping one's awareness clear and bright and clear. So that's those 5 positive. Again, positive, well, they're all positive, but 5 avoiding what's negative and 5 adopting what's positive. There's also a very common set of 10 which are break into body, speech and mind. So the body ones are not killing, stealing and committing sexual misconduct, and the speech ones are lying, abusive speech, divisive talk, and meaningless talk, chatter, just kind of wasting time really. And then the three of mind are avoiding ill will and covetousness in general. It's called nabsem, which always amuses me because it's something you want to nab things, whether they belong to others or not. And then harbouring, what could you say, misguided views, that, harmful views that are not in accord with the Dharma. So, and then I think you can imagine 10 to fit that, what the opposites would be. Obviously the last one would be cultivating an understanding of the truth of the Dharma. And I think it's kind of obvious, but one could talk a lot on all of those as well, because they're all relevant to how we live our lives. And it's quite striking that there's 3 for body, 3 for mind, but 4 for speech. That a lot of our negative karma arises from the way we use our speech, the way we communicate with others, or don't, or whatever. So it's a very, again, something that I find is a very, very interesting and important topic. Really, is how to communicate in a way that's beneficial to oneself and to others. And I think it's worth us putting a lot of time and energy into working with that as a sangha, or as a community, or in any community really, because that of course then has has an effect on what you do physically with your body and what you're doing mentally with your mind, and the three are working together. So speech is the part that perhaps is where the most change can come about, really, or through the speech. The speech has a very important part in changing the way we think, changing the way we behave, and the way we think is going to change the way we speak, and so on. They kind of feed into each other. Well, we haven't come to the speech one yet. At the moment, we're dealing with questions about the first precept about killing, which already can get quite complex. First of all, it sounds obvious. Peace-loving people don't kill, and the Buddha was a peace-loving. Peace was what the Buddha stood for. So it's a peaceful religion. One doesn't have wars in the name of Buddhism, one would hope. And obviously the most important one is not to kill other human beings. But then, especially I think in the West, we immediately start thinking of exceptions, when it might be a question of one person's life versus another. For example, a fetus in the womb, you've already got kind of difficult situations sometimes where it's the mother or the child. Like, or do you just leave the whole thing and pretend you didn't notice? It becomes quite an ethical dilemma, and it's worth considering those kind of things, and what one would do in those circumstances, and what one would be thinking as one did it. So on one side, it's helpful to have guidelines, like saying no killing. Killing is definitely out. And then there's situations in which it's really not obvious what's the right thing to do, because by killing one creature, you might be saving many others, or you might think you are. And then how do you think about it, the act of killing that's gone on? How do you manage as a Buddhist? How do you square that with being a Buddhist who's wanting to follow the precept on not killing? So then it's like you're dealing with, well, there's this clear-cut rule about not killing, you just keep it. I talked about that last month, I think. And that would be one level of practice. And then perhaps if one was more confident in one's discernment and one's capacity to discern harm from what's harmful from what isn't harmful, one might make decisions that did involve killing. It's not clear where you make a line between a living being and a sort of microscopic organism. And even when you start taking medicines that kill parasites and so on, you're already starting to kind of make decisions on life-death issues. And one starts to think about, well, what's the most beneficial for the most beneficial for the most beings. And if human life is an opportunity to practice Dharma, then human life would be a more important life than a microscopic life. Or how far are you going to go? like a big bear in the garden, big mad bear, kind of causing, threatening people's lives. So keeping just to the rule is kind of not so obvious. And I was talking last month about having to use one's discernment as best one can, which might mean then that you end up killing something. And one of the questions that came up was, so if you find that you are killing something because that seems to you to be the best thing to be doing in the circumstances, how do you handle the fact that you're doing something that's against the precepts, which is in some sense a negative action? And I think I said then that you can make pranidhanas for the being that you're harming. And pranidhana is a wish that is made from a very genuine place. So the greater your wisdom, the purer your conduct, the more genuine and honest person you are, the more powerful your wish will be. And you can formulate your wish, and you can formulate it according to the way the bodhisattvas in the past have, or present for that matter, the way bodhisattvas who are more realized than we are, the way they make their pranidhanas. And there are various recitations that you can do that accord with the wishes of the great bodhisattva enlightened beings, and by making that wish at that time when you're doing something which is very harmful to another being, you can make a strong connection that will actually benefit that being. So you could make up your own pranidhana, like one that I often make is that having made this connection with this being in this this time an unfortunate way, may it in the future benefit that being and benefit myself, so that in all our future connections with each other it's a very strong connection and conducive to enlightenment for both of us, so that we make a strong Dharma connection. I think like that. May we have strong Dharma connection in the future that will bring ourselves and all beings to enlightenment, so that our connections will always be positive in future lives. The Buddha, in some of the Jataka tales, the Buddha makes prayers for the beings who harm him, that in future lives they will be his first disciples, for example. I remember Kala Rinpoche saying that when he saw all us Westerners coming in the late 60s and early 70s, and we were arriving at his doorstep, and he said, well, when I was a child I used to always pray for the little insects that I came across in my life, and I used to pray that they would become my disciples in the future lives. So maybe you're all those little insects. It's very much his sense of humour. So that's the kind of pranidhana you can make, or you can use a mantra, because a mantra is like the heart or the heart or mind or speech of an awakened being, and so you're linking that being to that bodhisattva by making this prayer, by just saying the mantra, just saying the name of the bodhisattva, and then you can make a wish at the same time that this be beneficial for both that being and yourself, and help purify the karma that you're making. So a mantra that is very commonly used is the Avalokiteshvara's mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. so you might already be familiar with that mantra. But it can be the mantra, it can be any mantra. We do Guru Rinpoche mantra here a lot, so you could use that. Om Vajraguru Pamasidi Hum. Or you can use the Heart Sutra mantra, Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Svaha. That's connected more to the sutra, but it's the words of Avalokiteshvara in the sutra, so connects to Avalokiteshvara again. So that's what you can do. That's that question. Then another question was about vegetarianism, because obviously if you're not killing, that suggests that then one doesn't eat meat, because you can only eat meat if something's been killed, although that isn't entirely true. Things die. So, like you could have the attitude that you only ate meat when an animal's died. And, sometimes I've heard of monastic communities doing that. Generally they don't eat meat, but when there's an animal that's died, then they do. And that's probably quite good for them health-wise. Occasionally to have some meat, I'm told it's quite good, because we're naturally omnivorous, and it's quite a good supplement. So if things die naturally, but then we probably would draw the line at the mice and birds that the cat brings in. But there would be no harm, I think, there's no reason why not to. And even in very extreme circumstances where you hear of people having eaten other human beings again. There's nothing against eating meat if it's actually going to preserve life. But there are some Mahayana sutras that quote the Buddha as saying that we shouldn't eat meat because it's like shows disrespect for beings with whom we have such a strong and intimate connection. One of the ways it's put is that all beings have been our mothers in past lives, or mothers and fathers, because our past lives go back so far, and we've been round and round, taking birth again and again so many times. It's sort of like unimaginable length of time that at some time or other we've all been everything to each other. So we've all been each other's mothers and fathers and children and brothers and sisters, and I suppose you'd have to say enemies. But so that's one way you can think about it. Or simply, other beings have the same love of life that I have. And just as I would not want my life taken, another being doesn't want theirs taken. It's going to the Christian precept, isn't it? Doing unto others what you would have them do to you. It's kind of a very basic, instinctive thing. But eating is a different thing. So, even though those Mahayana sutras say, well, Buddha said don't eat meat because, all beings have been your mothers. Not all Buddhists take that view. So it's really up to us to interpret that as we want to. Generally speaking, these days, Western Buddhists think in terms of, well, if there's a market for meat, animals will get killed, therefore I'm not going to eat meat, so that there isn't a market. I'm not contributing to that. And I think that way. But then other teachers have said things like, well, the further you are from the actual killing, then the less it is like killing. So that if it's if someone's just killed something and then you take the meat, it's like very much associated with the act of killing. Whereas if you've just gone to the supermarket and bought a bit of sausage, well, it's kind of not very much associated with killing. I don't think Westerners would find that very convincing argument. I can see where he's coming from. Because yes, most Tibetans in Tibet were used to living on a meat diet, but I notice that there are some very eminent lamas now, like Chatur Rinpoche, very eminent yogin lama who preaches against eating meat, and so does the 17th Karmapa. So the way thinking is changing. But so that's all I'm going to say on that. Then the next question was an interesting one. It brings up a number of points. Last time I was speaking on the precepts, I was, says here, mentioned that we cannot ultimately rely on rules and that wisdom must be used to navigate these situations that life presents us. This seems the way to go and the only way that is sustainable and able to account for subtlety. However, I wanted to ask if setting firm resolves for set periods of time, according to our capacity, where we are more precise or by the book in any way increases the power of our word or intention, which would seem a beneficial result for budding bodhisattvas. By power of word or intention, I just mean that the things we intend to do or things that we say tend to manifest in our lives more frequently. I've noticed this sometimes in my life when I've kept strict discipline or shila for periods of time, and the difference in the events of my life was noticeable. But I don't think it was tied to the intention or resolve alone, but that carrying out the resolve fastidiously created more congruence between my word and my life, and this congruence fed back into future intentions. To me, it seems as though this ties in with punya, which is usually translated as merit. I'm sure the workings of this are all mysterious, so I don't expect a straightforward answer from Lama Shenpen, and if it's off topic, then disregard it. But I was curious if what I'm trying to describe here is discussed within the tradition, or if anyone else has noticed similar relationships. I hope so, and I'm not just odd. I don't really have a Buddhist framework or terms for understanding and talking about this. Perhaps it's similar to Jung's synchronicity. There's a sense of magic about it, and I've wondered if that is what Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche was referring to in some of his works, where he mentions that the magical nature of things, realizing it goes much deeper than what I've described here. I thought that brought up a number of very interesting points. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you today about was what's mentioned here, the power of one's word. So when we talk about the precepts, we tend to end up discussing quite where to draw the line in difficult situations. That seems to be where we as Westerners go straight away. When I talk to Tibetans about these sort of areas, these grey areas, I notice that they are as undecided as we are, and different Tibetans will give me different answers, and sometimes they will answer very definitely one way until I describe to them a difficult situation, and then they'll go off and they'll start thinking quite innovative. Yes, exactly, innovative. They're quite innovative in the way they start to try to deal with these kind of questions. So it's but generally speaking, they're very, very clear cut. You know, this is the formula, this is what we do, this is what we vow. It's just like straightforward, which is relates, I think, to this question that the actual taking of the vow itself has a power, and it affects the universe. And there's many stories in the scriptures, not only in the Buddhist scriptures, about the world being affected by the way people were living, keeping to strict rules of conduct. So it wasn't simply that they were living good lives, but they had actually made a vow or commitment that they were going to live in a certain way, that they were not going to kill, or they were not going to eat meat, or they were going to always receive guests graciously, or whatever the decision was. They made it very consciously, deliberately, and they would not break it even at the cost of their life. And then this is often given as the reason why the country itself was prosperous. And the karma, if you like, the karma of the country, the collective karma of the country was very positive. So somehow there's a connection between the intention and the power of the word and the power of having kept one's word, having given it. And there's folk stories worldwide, isn't there, that on this theme of having made a very strong, given one's word in a very strong way, and then having fulfilled that, and then that having a tremendous effect, bringing, well-being and peace or whatever to the world, or some very powerful effect. And from the Buddhist point of view, this is not accidental. That I think you're familiar enough with Buddhism and the Buddhist view of the world to know that it's the cosmos, if you like, is based on power of intention, and the result of that intention in acts of body, speech and mind, and then the results of those actions of body, speech and mind, which then ripen for us. It's called karma, the karma meaning action. So the intention behind the action, the actual action, and how that action, if you like, shapes your world in the future. So I think most Westerners find that quite straightforward to understand, that their actions, their intentions inform their actions, and their actions produce results in the immediate world around them. That if I am kindly disposed towards people and I speak in a nice, gentle way, then I'm likely to find I have lots of friends. So in that kind of sort of seems straightforward as a mechanism. But then when saying something to somebody in an abusive way doesn't have a particular effect at the time, but in a future life, I end up being born in a country where, a barren and a desolate country, and I find myself treated badly by everybody. It's not so easy to understand, well, how did that effect come from something that I did in this world? Because this world will have gone by then. But whatever world that is, it's a different world, and we can't imagine how what I did now could actually affect me in a future life, in a different world, with different people, or the same people, but not the same as they are now. So there's some kind of something that's not quite obvious to us because of our particular worldview. So if we stop and consider again a bit longer what the Buddhist cosmic view is, it's much more a sense of the fundamental structure of the universe, if you like, is not in time. It's not in time, it's not in place. It's not in any place, it's not in any time. And if you, when you're doing your formless meditation and you're trying to track down where your thoughts are, you might find very easily, relatively easily, that, well, I don't know where they are. That's a good clue. Where are they? When were they? By the time you're aware of them, they've gone. So how could you possibly be aware of them? But if you're not aware of them, how do you even know they have them? It's kind of, if you think about that for long enough, you realize you have to drop almost entirely your present view of the world. your view of the cosmos, a view of the universe. And you're entering into a mysterious, I suppose you'd have to say, dimension in a way. It's as if what's appearing to you and appearing to your senses is emanating from some deeper reality. And that's what's connecting, if you like, you and your life with the way your life is manifesting. So that connection between one life and another can be very deep, because it's at a level that's deeper than what you're seeing on the surface. And as you go nearer to the heart of that, where it's all emanating from, it becomes less and less tangible, but more and more powerful. And when you think about it, perhaps the least tangible thing to ourselves is that movement of intention. What is it? Where is it? How it? And yet, we can move it. We can intend. We can decide. We can choose. I think somebody last time asked, what chooses? It's a very deep, very profound question. What chooses? Because that choice is what's going to affect everything. Everything then that manifests in your experience will manifest from that you might say subtle or small. Could you call it small? Does it have any size? Movement, which then manifests as your world. And if that's not in space and time, there's no reason why it shouldn't emanate, have a power and effect in a future manifestation, in a future world or body. And if we're all like that, and we're all emanating from some deeper place, we're all connected at a much deeper level than perhaps we can trace when we start to kind of examine things scientifically, if you like, analytically. And the interesting thing is that you might think, well, this is a bizarre way of understanding the nature of the universe. I mean, who would think that, our whole world, with all its, all the vastness and the microscopic levels of our world, could actually be emanating from some mysterious intention. And yet, what's most meaningful for us in our life all emanates from our heart. And we feel that heart connection with others through birth, through death. It's kind of, as I often say, it's like, it's not in time even, it's not in any place, it's not in any time, but it's more real and it's more meaningful than anything else that's manifesting. It's at some much deeper level we're aware of. And this is what gives our word power. And in these stories, it's always a word that comes from that genuine heart of our being, with a very strong confidence in our ability to do that. That's how magic works. Magic works by having complete confidence in your word and in what you're doing. So it doesn't have to always be good. But here I'm talking about good. So when we say, really from a really genuine place, I will not kill. And I say this in front of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I say it in front of the Sangha. I say it in front of all those who uphold the truth. I say I will not kill. And you say it with complete conviction that you can do it. And that produces a result. Produces a result in the world. So strong that, and this I noticed with Tibetans, that they feel that has so much power in itself that even if you don't always keep it, that can be purified. That can be purified, and you can restore it. You can restore the power of your vow, your word, and your intention. If it's a sincere regret, you can restore it. So it's better to have that vow, have made that vow, and sometimes to break it and purify it, than to not have made it in the first place. So it's quite a new way of thinking, I think, for us in the West. We would tend to think, I won't make that vow because I don't think I'm going to be able to keep it always. Whereas I find with my friends and colleagues, Tibetans, they tend to feel the other way. I'll take it and I'll risk that I won't keep it all the time, but then I will purify it. I really completely intend to always restore it. It's an interesting, different way of thinking, isn't it? So I worry a bit about it sometimes, because I feel that in the West we do understand the importance of our word. I mean, we may not be good at it, but at least we understand it's important. And we're not always so convinced that we can purify what we've done that's wrong. So we don't want to undermine at least the bit that we've got, which is the power of the word, by thinking, well, it doesn't matter if I break it, because we don't have that same confidence in the power of the power of confession, repentance, and restoration that comes through the power of the Buddhas. So, yeah, one has to be careful teaching in the West, I find. But still, I think this is a very important aspect of thinking about the precepts, is that it is a very important element in it is the giving one's word and keeping one's word. And in fact, often when the word for keeping precepts is in Sanskrit is shila, and in Tibetan is sochen, and that's usually translated either as discipline or morality, or sometimes put together moral discipline or ethical behaviour or something like that, and missing out entirely this aspect of it, which is the making that verbal commitment, or making that strong intention, giving one's word. And then, in fact, when I told Rizin Shikpa this, he hadn't realised that, and he asked Khenpo Rinpoche about whether it was whether Suchim implied keeping your word. That's what it was about, keeping your word. And then he immediately gave a very profound answer, that for a greatly realised being, the power of their word didn't necessarily have to be expressed in words. So then Rizin Shikpa realised that actually the word, this word shila, or sutim in Tibetan, does imply a vow, or at least the essence of a vow, even if it's not actually a formal one. It's a formless one, but there is that element there, which sometimes I wonder whether it's one of the 6 paramitas: generosity, then shila, and then patience, concentration, energy or application, and concentration and wisdom. But this very important one for shila, but it should be translated more like keeping your word. But obviously it's only keeping your word when you've made a word that's in that conforms to the Dharma. You don't have to keep your word when you find it doesn't conform to the Dharma. So it's an interesting aspect. And then this idea in this question is, so does it increase the power of our actions by having given our word? And the answer is, well, yes. And I might have told you before, when I was living in India in the Kala monastery, I was vegetarian, and the monks used to love teasing me, and I didn't eat after midnight a day either, but I did have a vow for that. But they used to tease me in various ways, like offering me food after midday. Do you want something to eat? Waving down on my nose. They loved doing that. But then one day I went to get some I wasn't feeling very well, and I was in the kitchen, and they were serving up. The cook poured me. He said, "Would you like some soup?" And he poured me some soup. And then I said, "Oh, thank you," and I had it in my hands. And then he said, "It's bone soup," ha ha ha, big joke. So because I couldn't eat it, and I said, "Oh no, I'll drink it anyway." And then he said, "What? But you don't eat meat?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, that's meat." I said, "Yes, but I've decided to eat it." And he says, "But you've got a vow not to take meat." I said, "No, I don't." He said, "What? You don't eat meat and you haven't taken a vow? What a waste! Go and get one. Go and get a vow. Go and make a vow." Which is really interesting, isn't it? The idea that, and then he could rejoice in the fact that I'd taken a vow, because then that was actually creating this power of goodness that's not just supporting, giving me good karma, but it's actually supporting the whole place where I am. So, this cook definitely thought that he was going to get the benefit of my not eating meat as he merrily carried on. One of the charming things about Tibetans is they've really taken to heart this teaching of rejoicing in the good done by others. So whereas we tend to be rather competitive and think, well, if someone's doing a lot of practice, that means I should do more, and I can't do more, so that makes me feel bad, and I'd rather he didn't do so much, then I wouldn't feel so bad, which is very negative actually, and very only produces a negative effect. Whereas the Tibetans, when they see somebody doing something very good, I mean, obviously they're probably not perfect at this, but there's a big cultural tendency to say, well, that's fantastic, I rejoice in the good that you're doing, because by rejoicing in that way, they also make the same amount of good as you're making, because they're rejoicing in it. And you can feel it, can't you? You can feel it. If you see someone else doing something good, and you're thinking, well, that's fantastic, they're keeping a vow that I can't keep, or they're doing some practice that I can't do, and you're feeling really happy about what they're doing and the direction in which they're going, then you're going in the same direction, aren't you? You're being pulled by what they're doing in the direction of what they're doing. So it's tremendously positive. So I hope we can cultivate that here in the West as a general attitude, so that we're more inclined to exaggerate the good done by others than to try to minimize it and say, well, they're not as good as they look, which is very much our culture and in the media. It's all the time, isn't it? Good people, they're not as good as they look. They're not as good as they look, But this is a completely different attitude, thinking, well, they stand for something good, and that's wonderful. Sort of always looking up to in the right direction. So that's another aspect of how one can work with the precepts, in fact. So yes, and it's interesting that the person asking this question is saying that even when he does that for a short period of time, and this is an idea for everybody really, you might think, well, for various reasons, I'm not going to give up eating meat, I'm not going to give up killing, but maybe I'll do it for a period of time. So I'll keep the precepts very perfectly and very strongly for a month. It's a bit like Lent, isn't it? Giving up something for Lent. Mm. Or, make a New Year's resolution, I will do this for 1 year or something like that. But there is power in it, and so if there's some particular recitation that you find inspiring, or there's a particular mantra that you feel you would like to do, or you decide on doing your formless meditation that I'm going to do it every day for this length of time, you can make a very formal, or you come here and do a retreat, and you can say, I'm going to stay here in retreat for so many days, this is what my discipline will be. You can, as you begin the action, and it can be any action, I mean, it could be a resolve to do good thing in your life that you can't always do, but you want to do, like visit some person who's sick or whatever it is. make a very deliberate decision to do it, and to do it for a certain length of time, and then to keep to that, and then at the end dedicate that for the benefit of all beings, is a very powerful way to live your life and to practice developing the power of your word. So there might be something that you do that's quite harmful that you want to give up, and you're not sure whether you could do it forever, but you could at least do it for a period of time, and that would be quite powerful. And it's interesting that this person is noticing that immediately he can notice something's happening in his life. And I must say, when I decided to go off to India, when I decided to renounce everything and just go off to India and to follow the instruction that Trungpa Rinpoche had given me to go to take teaching from Kamatini Rinpoche, I noticed from that moment on so many strange coincidences. The people I met, the timing of when I met things, the way things came together. So I have to say, I've noticed it too. It's the kind of thing that you would call a synchronicity. Like incidents that are not normally, you can't see that they're connected, occur they sort of seem to follow a pattern of your life. It's very strange, isn't it? I remember somebody at Wolfson College saying to me once, this Indian chap thing, he's saying, oh no, it wasn't, it was someone else. He said, I want to do a study of whether it's true or not that it always rains when I go on holiday. Or for how many people this is true, because so many people say it's true. Is it true, and is it statistically significant? Because we all say it, don't we? There's sorts of things we say. The toast always falls on the jam side or whatever. So again, it's like the karmic thing, isn't it? How could it be? How could the weather be affected by what I decide to do? I mean, we don't have any reason to think that there would be any connection. And yet we all talk all the time as if it's going on all the time. That always happens to me, we say, don't we? Things like that. But how could that possibly be unless there's some other mechanism that's going on to do with intention? Maybe there is. Maybe intention is more fundamental. If it's all emanating from some form of intention, then maybe what we're intending is actually affecting the way things are coming together in the apparent world, which would give us a sense of magic. Like how does magic work? If I have a very strong intention, that such a thing will happen, and then I bring things together in a certain way with a very strong conviction that that's actually changing the universe, maybe it does change. So yes, that's all implied, really. It's we're talking all the time about all these teachings. We're talking about, from one point of view, how things appear, and you can analyze the way they appear and see they're like a dream or an illusion, or impermanent and changing, or unreliable, just simply magical appearances. And then at another level, you're talking about just resting in the true nature of our being and living from that very integrated place, and that will actually affect the whole world, or affect our lives, or affect our future and our path to awakening. That somehow it's all very simple, that we're looking at some very simple, trusting faith in an essence that we're intuitively aware of, and that's how things are. So when we're talking from that point of view, you might say, well, all you need is wisdom and compassion, and that open, clear, sensitive place, have confidence in that, and then all your actions will be naturally, spontaneously perfect. So that's how things are. But then from where we are, and we're not able to be quite as relaxed as that, everything's pretty chaotic. And what's really helpful is to have some clear guidelines and clear rules. But then, of course, as soon as we get the clear guidelines and clear rules, we start finding where they don't apply and worrying about them, like how far do we go with them and that kind of thing. So those two kinds of teaching are going on all the time. And I was thinking this morning that I would give you a whole teaching from the other point of view, but then I realised I wouldn't have time, so that we'll have to wait for another time. How's that for timing? So, I think I've covered all the questions. Has anyone got a question?
There might be people at home who are still lagging a little bit behind because you're just finishing now.
Right.
It's worth giving them a couple of minutes if they like. And Caroline and David are with us.
Oh, lovely. Hi there, Caroline and David, and everyone else. It's interesting, isn't it? They're all there. And we're all there in this point. Like, I always think it's amazing that this whole room, every detail of this room, is reaching me through this tiny little aperture in my eye. Every detail, it's amazing, isn't it? Seems so sure that I'm seeing something out there, but actually what's happening is the light is touching this tiny spot, and then I'm somehow projecting out that it's a room out there. And now this is projecting out right out into the world. It's amazing, isn't it?
I want to ask you a question about the designer of the universe. Because it seems to me that you look at nature and it's all so perfect in the eye. And whether your approach has a acknowledgement of that, or what feels in tune with that, or basically that.
Yes, when I look at all these programs about the nature of the universe, I don't know, was that clear enough? Did everyone hear the question?
Maybe it might be worth just repeating.
I'll repeat the question. The question was about the designer of the universe. When you look at the universe, you look at nature, there seems to be some design behind it, and the way I'm talking is implying the same kind of thing. And I'm saying, yes, when I look at nature, when I look at these programs about the nature of the universe in such detail, minute detail and vast detail and intricate detail, it just doesn't make sense to think that isn't some intelligence behind that at all levels. Actually, you talk about the body, like the intelligence of the body. You think there's intelligence everywhere. So I think to myself, that isn't that what we're saying in Buddhism, when we're saying that it's all emanating from the nature of, chitta, mind, or whatever. What is that other than intelligence? And when we try to ask ourselves, well, what is intelligence? The same as when we try to ask ourselves, what is life? Or love, or anything like that. These are words for what is so fundamental you can't actually find another way of saying it other than just being another word, because it's something that we know before the words, and it's a kind of what I call a place marker, rather than the other person knows what sort of thing you're talking about, and they respond to that, but actually the word can't really in any way indicate what it is we're talking about. So that, I feel that was with the intelligence. I mean, I'm doing my formless practice, and I'm just noticing, you're noticing thoughts, okay, and you let them go, and so on and so on. But then when you start to really become, let the thoughts be there, and you notice what they're doing, the intelligence, I mean, the complex planning, and, there is no past and future, and yet intelligence can create, whole strategies and worlds, and just like that. What is that? What is that? And it's going on everywhere. So I think, yes, when I hear that kind of talk, if it's done in other traditions where that might be called, like, I don't know. I hesitate to say God, because I know it has all sorts of connotations for people that are not, what I would mean.
Well, to me, it's all vocabulary.
Yeah.
They've all got different words.
Yeah.
We're actually all talking about the same thing.
I think so. I think if we are talking about the same thing, we are talking about the same thing, aren't we?
When you're talking about the precepts, I was thinking of the 10 commandments.
Yes.
It sounded pretty much identical.
Yeah.
So,
could be interpreted exactly the same, yeah. So that kind of, it's rather confirming, isn't it? That we're talking about reality. And, okay, different traditions use different vocabulary, and different traditions distort their own tradition in different ways. Yes.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I really liked what you said about intention when you're exploring that. What is that? Where that come from? I got quite excited then. It's like, where are we going here? I've not been here before. It's exploring something. And talk about dimensions. I think there are many dimensions. And Jesus said, my Father's house has many dimensions. And many rooms and things, I can't remember. But, yeah.
Yes, and of course that's from the point of view of modern physics and mathematics and so on. The whole question of dimensionality and multiple dimensions, and I think Rizal Shikpa said if you have enough dimensions you can express this whole universe with a single point. So it can be looked at in many ways. Yes, and as you say, you look in the scriptures of other traditions and you find statements that just jump out at you. Like, one doesn't have to assume that they're not talking about the same thing. Not at all. Or even assume that all Buddhists are talking about the same thing. Or all Christians are talking, and I think there's so much diversity within each tradition of how people are interpreting their own tradition. You really have to listen carefully to what any particular person is saying and how they're using words, and whether, we can't, words are only just pointing at something, aren't they? And you can tell by the way how the conversation goes, how a person is using the word. That's I feel it's really important, especially in such a mixed culture as our own. It's very important to be very careful to listen to people exactly how they're using words.
Absolutely.
Is that it? They're all very quiet, are they?
They're all very quiet online.
Right. Okay. So You can close them. We dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. And you sane rinpoche majabanam jejuji jabanyamba mapadam kone kondu pawasho. Chanju sane rinpoche majabanam jejuji jabanyamba mapadam kone kondu pawasho. Chanju samne rinpoche machabanam jejuji javanyamba mapadam kane kondu